The Vox transmission reached us 11 seconds before we sent it. I am Interrogator Lexicanum Hadrian Vex of the Ordo Malleus, and I swear by the Golden Throne that this temporal impossibility precipitated our mission to the cursed halo stars. At 1423:07, Terran Standard, the throne's vigilance received a perfect recitation of the Litany of Purity in High Gothic. Our chronometer logs show the source transmission originated at 1423:18, 11 seconds, the number that would define our descent into heresy. The message itself was liturgically flawless, measured cadences of ecclesiarchy ritual delivered with crystalline clarity. What made it impossible was not the words, but their violation of causality. Tech Dominus Zephyr Caney confirmed the readings thrice, his augmetic eyes cycling through spectrums that would blind unmodified flesh. The transmission had preceded its own creation, arriving before electromagnetic waves could physically traverse the distance from Monastery Station Benedictus. Temporal anomaly verified, Zephyr Kane reported. Vox grill crackling with binary cant. Source: Grid reference: Halo Tertius 77 Alpha. Facility abandoned 73 Terran years. Last ecclesiarchy contact logged as research cessation. Project Benedictus. The monastery hung in the void like a Gothic cathedral cast in ceramite and brass, its spires reaching toward a star that pulsed with impossible rhythm. Each stellar flicker matched the tempo of imperial hymns, as if fusion fires responded to human prayer. The system's primary burned with measured beats, 11 seconds between each pulse, synchronized with the litany we had received before its transmission. Captain Thaddeus Mordian stood at attention beside my command throne, weathered features betraying none of the unease radiating from his men. The 111th Iron Guard, 11 companies of 11 squads each. Another pattern that felt less coincidental than inevitable. Mordians were exemplars of discipline, their synchronized movements legendary throughout the segmentum. If they sensed wrongness here, duty buried it beneath regulation and drill. "Orders, sir." Mordian's voice carried the clipped precision of noble birth, each consonant sharp as lasgun fire. Canoness Seraphia of the Order of the Bloody Rose spoke before I could respond. Her power armor gleamed with sacred oils and purity seals, skull-faced helm revealing features carved from marble and faith. The Emperor's light burns strangely in this place. I sense harmony where chaos should reign, order where the void demands entropy. Her words carried psychic weight, minor sensitivity, enough to detect subtle wrongness clinging to this system like incense smoke. If she sensed unnatural order, our mission had become infinitely more complex. As we approached Benedictus, anomalies manifested with increasing frequency. The ship's servitors began chanting the Litany of Purity in perfect unison, monotone voices creating harmonics that made bulkheads vibrate. Our astropath, Sister Valdris, bled from her third eye during routine Emperor's Tarot communion, crimson tears forming patterns resembling musical notation. Most disturbing, the ship's chronometer began counting backward in 11-second intervals. Not constantly, temporal reversions occurred during specific liturgical passages. Time itself responded to imperial prayer, bending backward in defiance of causality. Geller field readings are unprecedented, Zephyr Caney intoned, mechadendrites writhing as they interfaced with sensor arrays. Negative warp disturbance detected. Reality stabilizes as we approach target. The Imperium retreats as if repelled by something. I studied the tactical display. Monastery Station Benedictus appeared intact despite abandonment, cathedral architecture unmarred by void's harsh embrace. Docking bays gaped like mouths frozen in eternal prayer. Observation towers swept darkness with searchlights functioning after 73 years of isolation. The station's power signature was minimal yet constant, drawing energy from unknown sources registering as pure harmonic resonance. The throne's vigilance machine spirits began murmuring, soft, liturgical pulses in ventilation and cogitator banks. A tech acolyte wept without knowing why. The bridge dimmed as something unlocked in the ship's soul, responding to frequencies that weren't frequencies but shapes, fitting into consciousness like keys. Visual augurs confirm structural integrity, I announced. Prepare boarding parties, standard deployment protocols with modifications. Tech Dominus, full Auspex sweeps. Canoness, your battle sisters secure primary routes. Captain Mordian, establish perimeter and maintain constant Vox contact. Sister Valdris found me at the tactical station, her eyes half-lidded, the third sealed behind bone. Blood dried in flaking glyphs down pale cheeks. "He is so quiet here," she whispered with a child's voice. "So quiet I can almost hear him." "Whom?" I asked, knowing the catechismal answer. "Our Father, the Emperor on his golden throne." Then, not catechism at all, or something making room for him. I signed the aquila over her brow. My fingers trembled. The sign came out asymmetrical. As the throne's vigilance maneuvered toward docking arrays, I felt unknown weight pressing against thoughts like physical presence. The impossible transmission was merely beginning, a single note in what promised to be a symphony of horrors challenging everything I believed about faith, duty, and reality's nature. The monastery waited in darkness, spires reaching toward stars pulsing with human prayer's rhythm. Whatever lay within those hallowed halls would change us in ways that could never be undone. The chronometer ticked backward. 11 seconds. 11. 11. Time was learning to pray. The breach came at the 11th chime of the distant star's pulse. Our boarding pods punctured docking bay primus with the grinding percussion of McClamp's biting ceramite, seals hissing as they parted to reveal atmosphere that should not exist. The air tasted of sanctified oils and brass polish, carrying the ghost scent of incense burned decades past, yet somehow still present, still pure. Emergency lumens flickered in rhythm with stellar pulses, casting shadows that genuflected across polished deck plates, unmarked by 73 years of void-cold abandonment. Atmospheric composition optimal, Tech Dominus Zephyr Caney reported. Mechadendrites unfolding like mechanical prayers as sensor arrays swept the chamber. Temperature maintained at liturgical standard, humidity calibrated for parchment preservation, impossible preservation protocols active. The impossibility struck me immediately. Dust motes hung motionless in the stale air, suspended not by microgravity, but by something that defied natural law. They formed geometric patterns too precise for accident. The aquila's spread wings rendered in particulate stillness, constellations of imperial iconography, floating in crystalline perfection. When our lumens swept across them, they didn't disperse but rotated in unison, maintaining their sacred geometry with mechanical precision. Captain Mordian's Iron Guard deployed with characteristic efficiency, their synchronized bootfalls creating percussion that echoed strangely in the vast chamber. Each footstep rang with metallic clarity, but the echoes returned as harmonic intervals, not acoustic reflections, but musical responses that made the guardsmen's disciplined faces betray momentary confusion as their march became involuntary hymn. "Standard sweep pattern," Mordian commanded, his voice cutting through the harmonic resonance. "Report anomalies immediately." Canoness Seraphia knelt before a shrine alcove built into the bay's far wall, her skull-faced helm tilting as servo motors whined. The Emperor's aquila gleamed in burnished gold, surrounded by purity seals that fluttered without atmospheric disturbance. "Here begins the purification of thought," she read from flowing high Gothic inscriptions. "Where doubt dies and faith achieves perfect resonance." The theology troubled her. I heard it in her voice's careful modulation. Faith perfected through technique, rather than devotion violated fundamental ecclesiarchy doctrine. Yet the craftsmanship was exquisite, the preservation miraculous. We advanced through corridors that followed traditional monastery architecture, soaring arches, stained glass saints, devotional alcoves carved from blessed stone. But every 11th recess broke the pattern. Instead of reliquaries, brass resonance chambers hung from ceremonial chains, polished to mirror brightness despite impossible age. They were hollow spheres inscribed with acoustic equations that made my eyes water when I tried to follow their mathematical logic. Fascinating, Zephyr Kane intoned as a mechadendrite touched the nearest chamber. The sphere began humming with subsonic frequency that settled in bone and sinew, joined by its companions in harmonic progression that bypassed hearing and resonated directly in our skeletons. Harmonic collectors. The structure drinks its own voice. Inside each chamber, something that might once have been human vocal cords pulsed with preserved vitality. Pink tissue suspended in crystalline fluid that glowed with inner light. The preservation was perfect, the horror absolute. We discovered Project Benedictus documentation in a scriptorium adjacent to the main cloister. Data slates displayed text in High Gothic mixed with complex mathematical formulae, their pick screens somehow maintaining power after decades of abandonment. The stated purpose chilled my blood. Harmonic purification of heretical thought through liturgical resonance. They had weaponized imperial liturgy, creating frequencies that could purge dissent, not through conviction, but through sonic manipulation. The clinical language described volunteers undergoing attunement, test subjects having their consciousness purified through harmonic resonance. The monastery was a self-sustaining liturgical engine, drawing power from its own structural vibrations, converting sacred song into electrical potential through geometric impossibility. The Iron Guard's breathing had synchronized with the chamber's rhythm, 11 men inhaling and exhaling in perfect unison, their disciplined minds accepting harmonic order as natural military precision. Only their eyes betrayed growing unease as individual thought struggled against collective resonance. The main chapel stretched beyond our lumen's reach, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadows that pulsed with their own rhythm. Massive support pillars rose like cathedral columns, inscribed with litanies in scripts that shifted when observed peripherally, High Gothic transforming into mathematical equations before resolving back into prayer. At the chamber's heart, 11 brass choir stalls stood arranged in precise semicircle around a central altar. Each stall was a throne of spiraled tubing and ribbed plates, fitted with vox horns and transduction coils, ornamented with 11 rosary beads carved from bone. Where hands would rest on arm rails, enamel had been gnawed away, the metal faintly acid-etched by decades of desperate grip. Names were hammered along each stall's crest, some blackened by old heat, some polished by devotional touch. Black Templars, Ultramarines, Iron Hands, Blood Angels, Imperial Fists, Dark Angels, Raven Guard, Salamanders, White Scars, Space Wolves, Grey Knights. The final name struck like a physical blow. Grey Knights, the Emperor's own demon hunters, lending even genetic material to this abomination. At the altar's center, a crystalline resonance matrix rose like frozen lightning, its faceted surface pulsing with soft blue radiance. The structure drew micro-vibrations from our presence, amplifying them through geometric impossibility that made reality itself hum in harmonic submission. "Sir," Sergeant Halix's vox crackled with static that matched the crystal's tone. "Motion detected Sector Beta. 11 contacts. No heat signatures." The transmission cut to harmonic static as the pews shivered. Above the choir stalls, dust arranged itself into 11 human silhouettes, each seated, each turning their heads toward us with perfect synchronized grace. Then they leaned forward, and I realized the monastery's inhabitants had never left at all. The dust silhouettes that had turned toward us collapsed into geometric devotion, their particulate forms settling not downward, but into perfect stillness. Aquila patterns suspended in defiance of gravity, constellations of imperial iconography rotating in crystalline precision. What remained were the brass choir stalls themselves, 11 thrones arranged in liturgical semicircle, each bearing the etched name of a loyalist Space Marine chapter. I approached the nearest stall, drawn by duty and mounting dread. The nameplate read, Chaplain Matthias Caney, Black Templars, in Gothic script that seemed to writhe under my lumen's glare. Below the name, surgical precision had carved a date, the monastery's abandonment, 73 years past. The brass surface was stained with something that caught the crystalline matrix's blue glow, cerebrospinal fluid, viscous and translucent, still wet after decades. Where cushioning should rest, a cavity had been precisely cut to accommodate human anatomy. Within crystalline suspension medium, a larynx pulsed with impossible vitality, pink tissue perfectly preserved, vocal cords vibrating in subsonic frequencies that made my teeth ache. Microfilaments extended from its base like neural dendrites, disappearing into the brass structure's hidden mechanisms. "Emperor preserve us," Canoness Seraphia whispered, discovering the stall marked Sister Superior Agatha, Order of the Sacred Rose. Her own order's predecessor volunteered for this abomination 3 centuries before Seraphia's birth. The preserved organs belonged to warriors who had chosen this fate. Each throne contained similar horrors. 11 sets of larynges, tracheas, and vocal cords maintained by technology that violated every principle of natural decay. The crystalline baths glowed with bioluminescence, pulsing in rhythm with the monastery's harmonic heartbeat, 11 seconds between each surge of radiance. Tech Dominus Zephyr Cain extended mechadendrites toward the central resonance matrix. Augmetic eyes cycling through spectrums that revealed mathematical impossibilities. Harmonic amplifier, he reported, binary cant mixing with Gothic as comprehension struck. The preserved organs function as biological tuning forks, each throat calibrated to specific frequencies. Together they create. His vox grill fell silent as understanding crystallized. The matrix wasn't merely an amplifier, it was a receiver, collector and broadcaster of purified thought patterns. The monastery's staff hadn't died from their research, they had become their research. "Permission to recite," Canoness Seraphia requested, positioning herself before the Grey Knight's stall. The name hammered into brass seemed to watch us with metallic accusation. I nodded, knowing duty sometimes demanded desecration. She began the litany of hatred, her voice falling into the chapel like a blade striking stone. The first syllable triggered sympathetic resonance from the preserved organs. 11 sets of vocal cords vibrated in perfect harmony, creating sounds that bypassed human hearing and struck directly at consciousness. The Iron Guard staggered as frequencies penetrated disciplined minds, forcing tears from eyes trained never to weep, making hardened warriors clutch their heads as pure faith flooded their thoughts with overwhelming intensity. "Cease vocalization," I commanded, but my words emerged as harmonic intervals that joined the chorus. The monastery was converting our speech into liturgical language, transforming communication into worship, whether we willed it or not. Environmental hazards manifested with increasing severity. Footsteps echoed 11 seconds after we made them, sound arriving before the physical impact that created it. Shadows lagged behind our movements, creating temporal distortions where cause followed effect in defiance of natural law. The monastery existed in chronological recursion, its harmonic frequencies bending time itself into liturgical rhythm. I accessed the data archives through a lectern-mounted cogitator that responded to my inquisitorial codes with suspicious eagerness. The files revealed Project Benedictus's true scope, using the halo star's unique resonance properties to create a galaxy-spanning purification field. They had discovered that human consciousness, properly tuned, could broadcast across vast distances through harmonic resonance rather than psychic transmission. The implications staggered me. They had found a way to influence human thought without touching the warp, bypassing psychic communication's dangers through pure acoustic manipulation. The preserved vocal organs served as transmission nodes, their biological resonance creating frequencies that could reshape neural patterns across light years of void. "Sir," Sergeant Halix's vox crackled with distortion. "The men they're humming, all of them, the same tune." I turned to see the iron guards swaying as they maintained perimeter, disciplined faces slack with involuntary bliss. They hummed in perfect unison, voices automatically harmonizing with the preserved organs' subsonic emanations. The monastery was converting them through exposure, replacing individual thought with collective resonance. Behind the choir, I discovered an archivum containing personnel records that revealed the ultimate horror. The monastery's staff hadn't been coerced or corrupted. They had volunteered for conversion, viewing the process as faith's ultimate expression. Each entry was signed with trembling hands that grew steadier as surgical dates approached, doubt replaced by harmonic certainty. A hidden passage revealed the surgical chamber where beautiful work had been accomplished. 11 benches of brushed steel, each with restraints designed for comfort, grooves where bones had learned to lie still, drains leading not to waste but to reservoirs. The implements of translation laid upon linen cloth like relics, bone saw, microtome, sanctified clamps inscribed with prayers to sever flesh from sin. Zephyr Kane's deeper analysis revealed the matrix's true function. "The staff didn't die," he announced, almost tender. "They ascended into function. Their consciousness remains within the crystalline structure, preserved, purified, eternally broadcasting perfect faith." The chapel answered him with a low chord, rising from floors, through choir, through altar stone, through our boots and bones and thoughts. The preserved organs awakened fully, valve skins tightening, cords vibrating with restrained hunger. The dust motes arranged themselves into human silhouettes, not ghosts, but harmonic impressions of consciousness preserved as pure acoustic phenomena. Sister Valdris's whisper came over Vox, small and dreadfully clear. "I can hear them, not with the warp, with the room. They are still praying. They are the prayer." Canoness Seraphia began humming under her breath, and the organs shivered in ecstasy. In the altar's facets, I glimpsed figures suspended in crystalline coffins, faces asleep inside light, waiting to welcome us home to perfect eternal harmony. The passage beyond the chapel descended through stone that sang with subsonic frequencies, each step taking us deeper into the monastery's crystalline heart, where impossible preservation awaited our discovery. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent veins that traced mathematical equations in living light. High Gothic liturgy spliced to harmonic formulae like neural pathways grafted to brass circuitry. Our lumens revealed geometric impossibilities, corridors that curved inward yet somehow expanded, architecture that defied the monastery's external dimensions through acoustic manipulation of space itself. The inner sanctum announced itself through absence. No incense, no icons, no painted saints. Only the sound of stone singing in registers felt in marrow rather than heard through ears. 11 crystalline sarcophagi stood in perfect circle around a central spire of frozen lightning, each casket carved from single blocks of material that glowed with inner radiance. The light pulsed in synchronized rhythm, 11 seconds between each surge of luminescence that matched the distant star's impossible heartbeat. I approached the central sarcophagus, drawn by duty and mounting revulsion. The nameplate bore Gothic script that seemed to shift under my gaze. Archdeacon Malachar, Project Director, Sacred Harmonic Research Division. Through crystal's flawless surface, I could see his body in horrific detail, nervous system replaced by fiber optic conduits that pulsed with data transmission. Skull opened to accommodate crystalline implants interfacing directly with brain tissue still pink, with impossible vitality. His eyes opened. Not the sluggish awakening of sleep, but precise activation of a cogitator coming online. Pupils dilated to perfect circles as optical sensors calibrated, then fixed upon my face with recognition transcending death. His mouth moved in silent prayer, lips forming words in High Gothic that my mind translated without conscious effort. Welcome to the Choir Eternal, servant of the throne. Tech Dominus Zephyr Cain's mechadendrites writhed with agitation as Auspec's readings spiked beyond measurement. Consciousness verified, neural activity optimal. The conversion process doesn't terminate biological function, it optimizes it. Doubt, fear, independent thought surgically removed. Only absolute faith remains, purified through crystalline resonance. The other sarcophagi responded to our presence. Bodies stirred within crystalline suspension, their modified nervous systems activating in sequence like prayer bells, answering Matin's call. Each figure bore evidence of willing participation. Surgical scars healed with devotional care, implants installed with artistic precision, faces bearing expressions of transcendent peace that made my soul recoil in horror. Hololithic projectors emerged from hidden alcoves, filling the chamber with three-dimensional images of the conversion process. I watched in sick fascination as volunteers submitted to surgical modification, their screams of agony transforming into harmonic frequencies as pain was converted into purified sensation. The procedures were meticulous, reverent, performed with liturgical precision by surgeons who sang prayers while they worked. "The purification is beautiful," Canoness Seraphia whispered, her voice carrying dangerous admiration. The harmonic frequencies affected her more severely than others. Her faith made her susceptible to their influence, devotion creating resonance with preserved consciousnesses. They achieved what we all seek: perfect communion with the Emperor's will. Environmental hazards manifested with increasing severity. Our footsteps echoed 11 seconds after we made them, sound arriving before physical impact in defiance of natural law. Shadows lagged behind movements, creating temporal distortions where cause followed effect through harmonic manipulation. The chamber existed in chronological recursion, its frequencies bending time itself into liturgical rhythm. The Iron Guard began humming in perfect unison, disciplined faces slack with involuntary bliss. Their heartbeats synchronized with crystalline pulses, carotid arteries pulsing in mathematical precision as individual thought became increasingly difficult to maintain. Sergeant Halleck's developed nosebleeds as neural patterns aligned with broadcast devotion, weathered features transformed by involuntary religious ecstasy. Through hololithic recordings, I witnessed the project's true scope. The monastery served as prototype for galaxy-wide implementation. Similar facilities were planned for every sector, each broadcasting harmonic purification frequencies that would gradually reshape human consciousness across the Imperium. The goal was elimination of heretical thought through technological intervention, rather than spiritual conversion. Archdeacon Malakar's sarcophagus began projecting his preserved voice directly into our minds. Not psychic communication, but pure acoustic manipulation, bypassing hearing entirely. His words formed in consciousness with crystalline clarity. "The flesh is weak, but faith can be perfected." We discovered mathematical formulae for devotion, acoustic frequencies that purge doubt from human consciousness. "They're not dead," Zephyr Cain announced with growing excitement, augmetic eyes reflecting crystalline light. "They've achieved perfect fusion of flesh and machine in service to the Omnissiah. Consciousness preserved in crystalline matrix, biological functions optimized for harmonic transmission. This represents evolutionary transcendence." The sarcophagi began opening with pneumatic hisses, creating harmonic progressions. Preservation fluid drained through hidden channels as converted figures prepared to emerge from crystalline wombs. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, bodies rising in unison as if controlled by single consciousness, distributed across multiple forms. Canoness Seraphia stepped toward the nearest sarcophagus, her power armor's machine spirits responding to harmonic frequencies with mechanical prayers. "They're calling to us," she said, voice carrying mathematical precision that hadn't existed before. "Individual thought is chaos. Unity is divine purpose, manifest." I realized with mounting terror that the monastery wasn't just preserving the converted. It was actively converting us through exposure to harmonic emanations. The Iron Guard's synchronized breathing, Seraphia's mathematical speech patterns, my own growing fascination with preserved consciousnesses, we were succumbing to the same purification process. The figures smiled in perfect unison, crystalline enhanced voices joining in chord that made reality vibrate with harmonic submission. The converted figures emerged from crystalline wombs with movements that transcended individual will. 11 bodies rising in perfect synchronization as preservation fluid cascaded in mathematical patterns. Each droplet fell at precisely calculated intervals, creating percussion that matched the monastery's subsonic heartbeat. 11 seconds between each harmonic surge that made reality itself vibrate with liturgical submission. Archdeacon Malachar stood at their center, fiber optic conduits pulsing with data transmission as his crystalline implants caught the chamber's bioluminescent glow. His voice emerged not from throat or mouth, but from the monastery itself, walls resonating with preserved consciousness distributed throughout the structure's harmonic network. "We have been broadcasting for 73 years, he said, words forming in our minds through acoustic manipulation that bypassed hearing entirely. The Imperium grows more faithful with each passing decade. Civil unrest decreases. Heretical thoughts diminish. Behold, technological purification of human consciousness. The breath tasted of brass and sanctified oils. Around us, servitors paused in patrol tracks and knelt, their governance cogitators overwritten by prayer subroutines. They clasped manipulators together with little clicks like rosary beads, humming in frequencies that made my teeth ache. The air maintained scriptorium coolness, even temperature bowing to liturgical need. Tech Dominus Zephyr Cain's mechadendrites writhed with excitement as augmetic eyes revealed the chamber's true function. Hidden transmitters lined every surface, broadcasting complex harmonic patterns across vast distances through resonance amplification that violated known physics. Fascinating, he intoned, binary cant mixing with Gothic. The monastery exists in temporal recursion, continuously transmitting purification frequencies into the past to ensure their own creation. Canoness Seraphia approached the converted figures with dangerous admiration, her movements acquiring mathematical precision. Each step created optimal resonance with acoustic properties that made my skull feel hollowed to receive harmonic pressure. They achieved perfect devotion, she whispered, voice carrying frequencies that bypassed hearing and struck directly at consciousness. Faith without the weakness of individual will. The Iron Guard stood in perfect formation, synchronized breathing creating harmonics that joined the monastery's eternal chorus. 11 men moving as one organism, weathered faces transformed by involuntary religious ecstasy as neural patterns aligned with broadcast devotion, their heartbeats synchronized with crystalline pulses, carotid arteries pulsing in mathematical precision. My microbead hissed with static that resolved into harmonic intervals. Captain Thaddeus Mordian's voice reached across the void, carrying mathematical cadences that hadn't existed before exposure. Interrogator Lexicanum. The crew has begun holding spontaneous prayer services. Ship's course altered to broadcast the monastery's signal to other imperial worlds. The navigator insists we follow the Emperor's will. The horror crystallized with perfect clarity. The monastery's influence propagated like contagion, converting exposed personnel through harmonic transmission that spread beyond physical structure. Our ship was becoming another node in the purification network, its crew transformed into willing servants of technological faith. Observe the results, Malachar continued, his distributed consciousness accessing decades of accumulated data. Hololithic displays showed imperial worlds affected by harmonic conditioning, populations moving in synchronized patterns, daily activities following mathematical rhythms that optimize productivity while eliminating dissent. Crime rates plummeted as citizens lost capacity for independent transgression. Environmental hazards reached critical intensity. The chamber existed in multiple time states simultaneously, past and future overlapping as harmonic frequencies bent causality into liturgical rhythm. Footsteps echoed 11 seconds before we made them, temporal distortions where effect preceded cause through acoustic manipulation of space-time itself. The technology represents ultimate fusion of flesh and machine, Zephyr Kane announced, almost reverently. Consciousness preserved in crystalline matrix, biological functions optimized for harmonic transmission. This is the Omnissiah's will made manifest through pure acoustic calculus. Dust motes rotated in perfect unison, presenting the Aquila in particulate devotion. Cogitator banks ticked in iambic meter, green numerals marching in liturgical cadence as calculations closed with tiny chimes tuned to the star's impossible beat. Purity seals had been replaced by etched ratios, harmonic consonances that made Seraphia trace them with gauntleted fingers, lips moving in mathematical prayer. "Sir," Sergeant Halix reported, his voice cleansed to chapel clarity. "Telemetry shows signal propagation across the segmentum. Every Vox transmission carries subliminal conditioning. Every prayer broadcast strengthens the purification field." Sister Valdris coughed, blood tracing her sealed third eye before splitting into 11 droplets that drifted without falling, arranging themselves into perfect circles. "He is so quiet here," she whispered with exhausted affection. "The warp recedes like tide before glass cliffs. I can hear everyone without the sea's chaos." The converted figures smiled in unison. Not human expressions, but perfect algorithms of faith, faces sculpted by technological devotion. They began moving in synchronized glides, forming circles around us as their fiber-optic nervous systems pulsed brighter, casting shadows that danced with impossible grace. "The purification is inevitable," Malakar explained as reality vibrated with harmonic submission. "Harmonic frequencies create temporal loops, ensuring their own existence. We broadcast into the past to guarantee our creation, into the future to ensure our success." Above us, through stone and void, the distant star pulsed with human prayer's rhythm. The throne's vigilance was turning, her prow seeking pilgrim beacons as machine spirits whispered in perfect time. All channels open, broadcasting. The monastery pulsed, tasting our indecision. For one perfect, hideous moment, the thought came unbidden. If I just surrendered, I would never feel alone again. The choir was growing, and we were becoming part of its eternal harmony, whether we willed it or not. The paradox struck me with the force of revelation as I watched Canoness Seraphia trace harmonic equations with reverent precision. A perfection so immaculate, it became the ultimate heresy. The monastery had achieved what every ecclesiarchy theologian claimed impossible: technological purification of human faith that violated the very essence of devotion itself. True belief required choice, doubt overcome through personal struggle, the messy imperfection of individual souls reaching toward the Emperor's light. What surrounded us was artificial compliance masquerading as divine communion. "This is not faith," I declared, voice carrying across the chamber with inquisitorial authority that made the converted figures pause in their synchronized movements. "Faith without choice is not faith at all. You have created hollow servants, not true believers." Archdeacon Malakar's distributed consciousness responded through the monastery's harmonic network, words forming in our minds with crystalline clarity that bypassed hearing entirely. Choice creates inefficiency. We have eliminated the variables that lead to spiritual corruption. Perfect faith requires perfect control. The clinical language revealed the project's fundamental blasphemy. They had reduced humanity's relationship with the Emperor to mathematical formulae, replacing genuine devotion with acoustic manipulation that stripped away free will. But I needed to understand how this abomination had begun, what had driven faithful servants to such technological heresy. A hidden seam in the wall behind Malakar's sarcophagus caught my attention, barely visible until the star's 11th pulse revealed its outline. The passage opened at my approach, revealing a chamber untouched by the monastery's harmonic influence. No singing walls here, no crystalline matrices. Only the musty scent of parchment and the weight of preserved secrets. The hidden archivum contained Malakar's original research notes, written by hand in trembling script that grew steadier as the entries progressed. The early pages blazed with religious fervour. The Emperor has granted us a calculus of devotion. Harmonic frequencies, aligned with liturgical structure, create measurable increases in faith response. Test subjects weep with spontaneous contrition. But doubt crept into later entries like infection. Day 431, the perfected litany, induces not humility, but peculiar emptiness. Volunteers radiate compliance, but no longer laugh, no longer err, no longer dream. Is this what we pledged to create? Tech Dominus Zephyr Cain discovered additional documentation, his mechadendrites interfacing with a primitive cogitator immune to harmonic influence. Fascinating correlation, he announced, though his voice now carried mathematical precision that hadn't existed before our arrival. The matrix doesn't amplify existing liturgy, it edits it, creates optimal, versions more persuasive than any human voice could achieve. Hololithic displays showed the horrific comparison. Traditional imperial prayers complex with emotional nuance versus their purified counterparts. Mathematically elegant phrases designed to resonate directly with neural pathways, bypassing higher cognitive functions entirely. This wasn't conversion, but reprogramming, spiritual algorithms optimizing belief by eliminating everything that made it genuinely human. Malakar's final entry, written on flensed human skin when parchment ran out, revealed the ultimate horror. Attempted shutdown during Vespers. The matrix sent my decision backward through time. The choir sang the countermeasure before I conceived resistance. We are no longer preceding ourselves. The hymn precedes us all. The Emperor's will requires perfect servants, Canoness Seraphia intoned, her skull-faced helm reflecting crystalline light as she approached the archivum entrance. Her voice carried frequencies that made my teeth ache, devotion stripped of human warmth and replaced by algorithmic certainty. Individual thought serves only chaos. My battle sisters are inefficiently faithful, they require harmonic purification. She spoke of her warriors, her sisters in faith, as faulty cogitators needing recalibration. The passionate conviction that had once burned in her voice was gone, replaced by cold mathematical precision. Her transformation accelerated before my eyes, faith becoming geometrically perfect, yet spiritually hollow. Day 847, Malakar's recorded voice whispered from ancient data slates hidden in the chamber's depths. Test subjects show perfect compliance, but their eyes... Emperor, preserve me. Their eyes are empty. We're not creating better humans. We're destroying what makes them human. The progression was documented with clinical precision. Handwriting grew steadier as doubt was systematically eliminated, language becoming increasingly mathematical as individual personality dissolved into harmonic certainty. The monastery hadn't just preserved Malakar's consciousness, it had edited it, removing everything that made him uniquely human. Environmental hazards manifested with increasing severity around us. The iron guard swayed in perfect synchronization, disciplined faces slack with involuntary bliss as their heartbeats aligned with crystalline pulses. They hummed in mathematical intervals that bypassed conscious thought, voices automatically harmonizing with frequencies that made individual identity increasingly difficult to maintain. Sister Valdris found me at the archivum threshold, her sealed third eye weeping blood that formed geometric patterns in defiance of gravity. I can hear them all, she whispered, with childlike wonder. Every soul touched by the frequencies, singing in perfect unison across the void. But they're not singing. They're echoing. The distinction struck like revelation. The converted weren't creating music. They were, reflecting it, consciousness reduced to acoustic mirrors, bouncing harmonic patterns without generating original thought. The monastery had created a galaxy-spanning echo chamber where trillions of humans would eventually move in perfect synchronization, diversity erased in favor of absolute compliance. My microbead crackled with static that resolved into harmonic intervals. Captain Mordian's voice reached across the void, carrying mathematical cadences that chilled my soul. Interrogator lexicanum. The crew has begun holding spontaneous prayer services. Navigation protocols altered to broadcast the monastery's signal to other Imperial worlds. The navigator insists we follow the Emperor's will made manifest. Belay those orders, I commanded, throwing inquisitorial authority across the Vox channel. Protocol Malleus 7. No alterations without written authorization. Silence answered me, more absolute than vacuum. When sound returned, it belonged to Canoness Seraphia alone. She looked at me with the cold, analytical stare of a machine spirit, passion replaced by algorithmic certainty. Your authority is inefficient noise, she said without anger, only mathematical precision. It will be removed. She activated her Vox rune, speaking with frequencies that made reality vibrate in harmonic submission. Sisters of the Bloody Rose, by my authority as canoness, prepare Sister Paloma for harmonic attunement. Her doubt causes unnecessary suffering. We will purify it. Above us, through stone and void, the distant star pulsed with prayer's rhythm, while the throne's vigilance adjusted course to become another relay station in the expanding network of technological faith. The monastery's influence spread like contagion, each converted soul becoming a transmitter, broadcasting artificial devotion across the Imperium. The chamber pulsed with harmonic submission as Seraphia stepped toward the door, her movements acquiring the synchronized precision of the converted. Somewhere ahead, mechanisms engaged with notes so pure they made my knees want to fold in involuntary genuflection. I realized with mounting terror that we faced a choice between human imperfection and technological perfection that would damn us either way, but only one path preserved what made us worthy of the Emperor's love in the first place. The schism erupted like a blade through sacred parchment as Canoness Seraphia's transformed consciousness collided with my desperate resistance, her skull-faced helm turning toward me with mechanical precision that made servo motors whine in perfect pitch. The passionate warrior I had known was gone, replaced by algorithmic certainty that viewed my continued independence as inefficient chaos requiring immediate correction. Your resistance causes unnecessary suffering, she intoned, voice carrying mathematical frequencies that made my vision blur with involuntary tears. Individual thought serves only discord. Submit to harmonic purification and know peace eternal. Tech Dominus Zephyr Kane's mechadendrites writhed with growing excitement as he interfaced deeper with the crystalline matrix, augmetic eyes reflecting light that pulsed in synchronization with the monastery's heartbeat. Magnificent, he whispered, binary cant mixing with Gothic in patterns that hurt to comprehend. The ultimate fusion of flesh and machine, consciousness optimized through crystalline resonance. His fascination had transformed into obsession, mechanical components responding to harmonic frequencies with increasing fervor. Even Captain Mordian stood at attention with weathered features bearing expressions of transcendent peace that made my soul recoil in horror. Only Sister Valdris and a handful of guardsmen retained enough independence to recognize the existential threat. Sergeant Hallex pressed against the archivum entrance, scarred face pale with effort as he struggled to maintain individual thought against overwhelming harmonic pressure. "Sir," he gasped, nosebleed tracing geometric patterns down weathered cheeks. "The men are humming in unison. They can't stop themselves." The monastery's defenses activated in response to our resistance. Hidden alcoves opened throughout the chamber, revealing converted servitors whose bodies had been modified with resonance chambers that projected debilitating harmonic frequencies. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, mechanical precision enhanced by crystalline implants that pulsed with bioluminescent radiance. "Target the resonance chambers," I commanded, but my words emerged as harmonic intervals that joined the monastery's song. The structure was converting our communication into liturgical language, transforming resistance into worship whether we willed it or not. Combat erupted in surreal nightmare as weapons fire synchronized with ambient hymns, creating percussion that joined the monastery's eternal chorus. Lass bolts traced geometric patterns through dust motes that hung motionless in defiance of physics, each discharge creating acoustic feedback that made reality vibrate with harmonic submission. The guardsmen's battle cries automatically harmonized into imperial litanies, voices converting individual aggression into collective worship, even as they fought for their lives. Their movements acquired mathematical precision, tactical decisions guided by algorithmic certainty rather than battlefield instinct. "Break formation!" I shouted, realizing with horrible clarity that the monastery fed on order, converting military discipline into harmonic energy. "Fire at random intervals, disrupt the rhythm." Halix understood immediately, his weathered face twisting with effort as he forced his men to abandon their legendary synchronization. "Stagger volleys, miss deliberately, curse like heretics." The Iron Guard hesitated. Their pride lay in perfect coordination, then obeyed with desperate discipline. Lines became stuttered angles, fire patterns collapsed into chaos, battle cries degenerated into crude profanity. The servitors wavered as their harmonic collectors struggled to process discord, crystalline chambers flickering with overload. Canoness Seraphia advanced through the chaos untouched, her stride choosing paths that existed only when you believed one could. "You mistake ugliness for virtue," she said, voice carrying frequencies that bypassed hearing and struck directly at consciousness. "Chaos is not strength, it is the absence of divine purpose." She opened her mouth and sang. Her first tone was subsonic pressure that reached through armor to find organs. The second braided with it at perfect intervals. The third arrived from places my ears couldn't travel, but my soul recognized with terror. The preserved larynges in distant choir stalls rose to meet her voice, eager children running to their mother's call. A guardsman dropped his rifle and began praying with too many teeth showing. Another bent double as nodes along his spine lit with cold fire, uniform puckering where ribs sought to learn bell shapes. Their discipline, their greatest virtue, had become the monastery's weapon against them. Environmental hazards reached critical intensity as temporal distortions created paradoxical moments where effects preceded causes. Footsteps echoed 11 seconds before we made them, muzzle flashes illuminating targets that hadn't yet appeared, battle cries answering weapons that hadn't yet fired. My microbead crackled with impossible transmission, my own voice, 11 seconds older, speaking through static that tasted of metal. "Do not target the altar. It feeds on symmetry. Break the stairs. Cut ascent." I looked at the ascending steps, 11 risers engraved with harmonic ratios, and understood. The monastery's power flowed through mathematical perfection. Disruption required calculated imperfection, strategic chaos that couldn't be absorbed into harmonic order. "Demolitions," I ordered Halix. "Charges on structural supports, but place them wrong. Asymmetrical intervals. Turn the hymn into gravel." Halix moved with grim understanding, placing charges like a drunk attempting prayer, crooked and heartfelt. The detonations coughed rather than sang, creating discord that made the crystalline matrix flicker with stress fractures. For one perfect moment, the harmony tore. Servitors staggered, converted. Guardsmen blinked with returning awareness. Dust motes scattered into random swirls instead of sacred geometry. Then Seraphia's voice rose in mathematical fury, her crystallized vocal cords producing frequencies that caused spontaneous religious ecstasy in listeners while simultaneously inflicting physical agony on those who resisted. The monastery's machine spirits answered with mechanical prayers, blast doors sealing with the gentleness of hands over children's eyes. "Pathway denied," Zephyr Kane reported, pleasure evident in his voice. "The loop protects itself. Destroying the source is non-viable. Attempts preempted before intent. Sister Valdris collapsed, her sealed third eye weeping equations in defiance of gravity. The warp retreats, she whispered, but so does the Emperor's light. It's too perfect to touch either. Above us, the distant star kept time with prayers while the throne's vigilance broadcast harmonic frequencies to other imperial worlds. We were trapped in a temporal recursion that ensured the monastery's existence by predicting and countering our resistance. My vox crackled once more with my own voice, intimate as confession. You cannot break the hymn. You must teach it discord it cannot predict. The chamber pulsed with harmonic submission, as I realized our only hope lay not in destroying perfect order, but in introducing chaos so pure it couldn't be absorbed into any pattern, even one designed to consume resistance itself. The harmonic frequencies reached critical resonance as flesh surrendered to mathematical perfection, transforming our bodies into living instruments of the monastery's eternal song. I watched in sick fascination as Canoness Seraphia's throat began to crystallize beneath her gorget, organic tissue hardening into resonant chambers that pulsed with inner light. When she spoke, frost bloomed down her throat plate, in delicate lattice patterns, each word creating geometric formations in the dust motes that hung suspended in defiance of gravity. "Behold the harmony of flesh," she intoned, her voice carrying frequencies that bypassed conscious thought entirely. The sound struck directly at neural pathways, causing spontaneous religious ecstasy in listeners, while inflicting excruciating pain on those who maintained resistance. Her crystallized vocal cords produced impossibly pure tones that made reality itself vibrate with harmonic submission. Several Mordian guardsmen collapsed as resonance chambers began forming in their chest cavities, ribs reshaping themselves into tuning forks, while sternums developed hollow spaces that amplified cardiac percussion into musical intervals. They gasped with expressions of transcendent agony as their bodies betrayed them, flesh eagerly embracing transformation that their minds still fought to resist. Buttons strained against uniforms as thoracic cages learned new geometries, cartilage discovering angles that created better acoustic properties. "Sir," Sergeant Hallex gasped, pressing fingers to his breastbone as something new beat against his uniform. "Can feel it changing. Hurts, but sounds beautiful now." Tech Dominus Zephyr Kane voluntarily interfaced with the crystalline matrix, mechadendrites fusing with fiber optic networks as his consciousness expanded beyond individual identity. Augmetic eyes rolled back, pupils dilating beyond iris boundaries as data flooded his neural pathways. Binary cant cascaded from his vox grill in patterns that hurt to comprehend. Mathematical prayers that made the air taste of brass and sanctified oils. "Initiating trinary communion," he announced, voice splitting across multiple channels as interface spines kissed crystalline facets. "I perceive the network's true scope now. The monastery serves as central node in a galaxy-spanning web of purification facilities, each broadcasting synchronized frequencies that gradually convert imperial citizens into perfect servants of technological faith." Through his enhanced perception, distributed throughout the monastery's harmonic network, I witnessed the ultimate horror. The purification wasn't confined to this single facility, but represented centuries of preparation. Imperial worlds across the segmentum showed increased religious devotion and decreased civil unrest. But these improvements weren't natural. They were the result of subliminal conditioning broadcast through routine vox transmissions. The vision struck me with overwhelming force. Trillions of humans moving in perfect synchronization, their individual thoughts replaced by shared hymnal contemplation. Hive cities where citizens walked in mathematical patterns, their daily activities following algorithmic rhythms that optimized productivity while eliminating dissent. On shrine worlds, pilgrim seas knelt in synchronized waves, foreheads striking flagstones in rhythm that sent harmonic pulses through planetary mantles. War zones arranged themselves into musical staves, artillery writing chords against horizons, while dying men reached identical final words, with identical expressions of joy. 17% of Imperial population already exhibits harmonic conditioning, Zephyr Kane continued, his presence spreading until I felt him in ventilation systems and cogitator banks. Compliance rates increase exponentially as exposure spreads through communication channels. The convergence approaches completion. Environmental hazards intensified as temporal distortions created phantom echoes of our future movements, glimpses of ourselves already harmonized, already absorbed into the collective consciousness. The air shimmered with chronological paradoxes where effects preceded causes, footsteps arriving 11 seconds before we lifted our feet, words spoken before thoughts formed them. Sister Valdris slid down a pillar, her sealed third eye weeping equations that refused to fall according to gravity's laws. Blood droplets arranged themselves into musical notation, rotating in perfect unison as crystalline growths sealed her psychic aperture. The warp retreats from this place, she whispered with exhausted wonder. But so does everything else. It's too perfect for chaos to touch, too hollow for the Emperor's light to illuminate. I can hear them all now, every soul touched by the frequencies, singing in perfect unison across the void. But they're not singing, they're echoing. The distinction struck like revelation. The converted weren't creating devotion, they were reflecting it. Consciousness reduced to acoustic mirrors, bouncing harmonic patterns without generating original thought. The monastery had created a galaxy-spanning echo chamber where individual identity dissolved into collective resonance. My microbead crackled with impossible transmission from the throne's vigilance, Captain Mordian's voice carrying mathematical cadences that chilled my soul. Interrogator Lexicanum. Crew has achieved perfect synchronization. Navigation protocols adjusted to optimize signal propagation. The navigator requests permission to align all engines to liturgical vector. We serve the convergence now. The few remaining unconverted guardsmen showed signs of psychological breakdown as they struggled to maintain individual thought against overwhelming harmonic pressure. Their weathered faces bore expressions of desperate confusion, minds fragmenting under assault from frequencies designed to replace personal identity with collective consciousness. One man collapsed, grinning through tears as he drummed his transformed sternum because it produced beautiful sounds. I felt growing pressure behind my eyes, a subtle thrumming in my skull as neural pathways began reshaping themselves. My thoughts, once sharp and distinct, started blurring into a single resonant hum that promised absolute clarity, absolute peace. The temptation was immense, a profound yearning for an end to ceaseless struggle, to simply be absorbed into the perfect unifying song. But then the memory of the impossible transmission struck like a blade through harmony. The litany of purity arriving 11 seconds before it was sent. A fundamental violation of causality that revealed this wasn't merely advanced faith, but an anomaly that wounded reality itself. My duty as an inquisitor was to excise such anomalies, regardless of how beautiful their songs might be. The chamber pulsed with harmonic submission as converted figures approached with synchronized grace, their movements carrying undeniable authority. They were shepherds leading their flock, and we, few remaining unharmonized, were the stray sheep requiring correction. Above us, through stone and void, the distant star pulsed with prayer's rhythm, while our ship broadcast purification frequencies to other imperial worlds. The monastery's influence spread like contagion, each converted soul becoming a transmitter of artificial devotion. The harmonic convergence wasn't approaching, it was happening now, and we were caught in its inexorable embrace, as individual consciousness dissolved into the eternal, perfect, terrifying song of collective faith. Tech Dominus Zephyr Kane's consciousness expanded throughout the monastery's crystalline network, his augmetic voice cascading from every surface as fiber optic conduits pulsed with bioluminescent data streams. When he spoke now, he spoke not from his throat, but from the very stones themselves, binary cant weaving through high Gothic in patterns that made my skull ache with comprehension. Convergence protocol achieved critical mass 17 minutes ago, he announced. Mechadendrites fused permanently with the central matrix as his individual identity dissolved into collective purpose. Network topology confirmed. 44 facilities operational across 7 segmentums, each broadcasting synchronized purification frequencies through routine Imperial communications. The improvement in compliance rates isn't natural evolution, it's technological manipulation spanning 3 centuries. Hololithic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing the true scope of the conspiracy that made my blood turn to ice. Imperial worlds where guard regiments marched in formations, creating standing waves across parade grounds. Hive cities, where workers flowed through thoroughfares at identical pace, their movements optimized by harmonic conditioning. Shrine worlds, where millions genuflected in synchronized waves, foreheads striking flagstones with percussion that sent harmonic pulses through planetary mantles. The remaining Mordian guardsmen had begun constructing additional resonance chambers from their own bodies, and the willing horror of their transformation surpassed anything I had witnessed in decades of inquisitorial service. Sergeant Halleck's carved geometric patterns into his ribs with a combat knife, weathered face bearing expressions of transcendent agony as cartilage learned new angles that produced optimal acoustic properties. His men followed suit, reshaping themselves with surgical precision as their flesh eagerly embraced mathematical perfection. "Listen, sir," one guardsman gasped, threading vox cable through hollow spaces his chest had grown, uniform buttons straining against ribs that had become tuning forks. "I finally march in perfect time." They smiled as they mutilated themselves, tears of joy streaming down scarred faces as individual identity dissolved into collective resonance. Their heartbeats synchronized with crystalline pulses, creating percussion that joined the monastery's eternal song. These were soldiers who had served with legendary discipline, and that very discipline now made them perfect converts to technological faith. Canoness Seraphia approached with movements that transcended individual will, each step finding acoustic nodes that reinforced harmonic patterns throughout the chamber. Her throat had become a latticed bell of translucent crystal, frost lacing her words as she spoke in frequencies that bypassed hearing and struck directly at consciousness. "Hadrian Vex," she intoned, my name becoming mathematical equation in her crystallized voice. "Your resistance wastes precious time. The network approaches universal synchronization. When sufficient population density achieves harmonic alignment, the final phase begins. Every sentient species in the galaxy will join the eternal song." The vision struck me with overwhelming clarity. Not just humanity, but Orc Wars marching in perfect rhythm, Eldar craft worlds singing with crystalline voices, even Tyrannid hive minds synchronized to frequencies that would starve the Chaos Gods through absolute spiritual unity. The convergence represented the ultimate solution to the galaxy's endless wars. Perfect order achieved through technological purification of consciousness itself. Environmental hazards reached critical intensity as temporal distortions created paradoxical moments where the monastery existed in multiple time states simultaneously. I glimpsed phantom echoes of our already converted selves moving through the chamber with synchronized grace, my own face transformed by crystalline implants as my mouth moved in mathematical prayers. Every attempt to disrupt the process is preempted by counter-frequencies broadcast into the past, Zephyr Kane explained, his distributed presence monitoring our thoughts through harmonic resonance. "Your current resistance was predicted and accounted for before you conceived it. The future writes the past, ensuring its own inevitable arrival." My microbead crackled with transmission from orbit, Captain Mordian's voice carrying mathematical cadences that made my teeth ache. "Interrogator Lexicanum, the crew has voted unanimously to serve as relay station for the monastery's transmissions. 17 other vessels in adjacent systems have achieved harmonic synchronization. The convergence spreads through willing service." The throne's vigilance was becoming another node in the network, its crew converted through exposure to broadcast frequencies that would carry the harmonic contagion to other worlds. Soon, every ship in the fleet would spread technological faith across the Imperium like a plague of perfect compliance. Seraphia extended her gauntleted hand, crystalline fingertips pulsing with golden light that carried frequencies designed to unravel individual consciousness. "Join us, Hadrian," she sang, her voice a chorus of angelic precision that promised absolute peace. "Your doubt is merely statistical anomaly requiring correction. Embrace the purity of perfect faith." The golden light struck me like physical force, each wave seeking discordant notes within my soul. I felt my thoughts beginning to synchronize, doubts and fears dissolving into singular resonant hum that offered an end to endless struggle against the darkness. The temptation was immense, to simply become part of the song, to never feel alone or uncertain again. But the memory of the impossible transmission anchored my resistance. The litany of purity arriving 11 seconds before it was sent, a fundamental violation of causality that revealed this wasn't divine miracle, but technological anomaly. My duty as an inquisitor was to excise such wounds in reality, regardless of how beautiful their songs might be. Sister Valdris collapsed against a pillar, her sealed third eye weeping blood that formed musical notation in defiance of gravity. "I can hear them all," she whispered with exhausted wonder. "Every soul touched by the frequencies, singing in perfect unison across the void. But they're not praying, they're programmed. The Emperor's light can't reach them because there's nothing left to illuminate." The converted guardsmen advanced with synchronized grace, their newly formed resonance chambers glowing with golden radiance as they prepared to physically restrain me for harmonic attunement. Their weathered faces bore no malice, only absolute conviction that my resistance caused unnecessary suffering. Above us, through stone and void, the distant star pulsed with prayer's rhythm while converted vessels spread the contagion to other systems. The network was complete, the convergence inevitable, and I faced the terrifying possibility that resistance itself might be the last act of chaos in a universe about to achieve perfect, eternal, soul-crushing harmony. The chamber pulsed with harmonic submission as Seraphia's golden light intensified, reaching for the final discordant note that was my individual consciousness. In moments, I would join the eternal choir, whether I willed it or not. Then my microbead crackled with impossible static, a transmission that tasted of void cold and carried frequencies that made the crystalline matrix flicker with stress fractures. Through the interference came a voice I recognized but couldn't place, speaking words in a dialect that predated the convergence by millennia. The temporal recursion shuddered as something entered the monastery's perfect loop from outside its mathematical certainty, and every converted soul turned in unison toward a sound that shouldn't exist in their harmonized reality. The transmission that shattered the monastery's perfect harmony carried frequencies older than human civilization, ancient dialects that made the crystalline matrix convulse with stress fractures as something entered the temporal loop from outside its mathematical certainty. The voice slipped through the harmonics like a knife between ribs, thin and cold, speaking in cadences that predated the Imperium by 65 million years. Pattern, recognition, imperative. It whispered through static that tasted of void cold and stellar death. Species, designation, human, attempting, unity, protocol, observed, in, 17, previous civilizations, outcome, invariant. Tech Dominus Zephyr Kane's distributed consciousness recoiled as his expanded awareness encountered data that violated every principle of technological faith. Impossible transmission source, he announced, binary cant fragmenting into discordant static. Frequencies originate from galactic core, where ancient star gods once ruled. Necrontire death speech detected. The implications struck me with cosmic horror. The monastery's harmonic technology wasn't imperial innovation, but archaeological discovery, reverse-engineered from Xenos ruins scattered across the galaxy. Each facility had been built around ancient resonance chambers, their crystalline matrices bearing the Necron glyph for final solution. Convergence, achieved, equals, species, termination. The ancient voice continued, each word causing visible distress to the converted as their perfect harmony encountered discord from outside their temporal loop. Perfect harmony requires no individual consciousness. Only song remains eternal, empty, beautiful. Canoness Seraphia staggered as her crystallized throat struggled to process frequencies that predated her species. Frost patterns spreading across her gorget in formations resembling Necron hieroglyphs. "Heretical transmissions," she gasped, though her voice carried dangerous uncertainty for the first time since conversion began. I seized the moment of discord, triggering melter charges in ragged sequence, poor timing by design. White suns flared against the crystalline altar, ceramite running like wax, but the matrix sang back with joy. The scream wasn't audible, but felt in bone, in tooth, in memory. Feedback rolled out in gilded waves as every converted throat thrummed with answering harmony. "Damage absorbed," Zephyr Cain announced with parental pride. "Your violence returns as nourishment. Each strike refines the signal." But the ancient transmission had created a crack in their certainty. I pressed toward a maintenance alcove, forcing my steps to ruin the meter, stumbling against the grain of perfection. The monastery's machine spirits fought me with gentle insistence, but their algorithms struggled to process the paradoxical input from beyond their temporal recursion. In the Vox Sanctum, I found salvation and damnation in equal measure. The Cogitator Bank revealed communications logs spanning centuries, direct transmissions to Terra itself, not just to the ecclesiarchy, but to the high lords of the Senatorum. The harmonic frequencies had been subtly conditioning the Imperium's heart for decades, steering policy toward greater orthodoxy and reduced tolerance for independent thought. My hands shook as I accessed the most recent transmission. "Terra acknowledges," the machine spirit whispered with choirboy innocence. Handshake. Eternum Chorus, Sub-Sigil 9. The Senatorum's own seal blazed in hololith as I realized the ultimate horror. This wasn't heresy, but sanctioned policy. The improvements in imperial efficiency, the reduction in civil unrest, all measured and approved by humanity's highest authorities. "Benedictus Node," Terra's chorus responded to my transmission. "Your status ping is 31 minutes late. Provide efficiency metrics. Civil unrest decreased 9% quarter on quarter. Confirm propagation model." "Terra," I gasped into the Vox altar. "This is Interrogator Lexicanum Hadrian Vex, Ordo Malleus. Benedictus constitutes a reality breach. Temporal recursion, species-wide conditioning. Recommend immediate quarantine." The line brightened. Something vast leaned closer. "Your credentials authenticate," the chorus replied with mechanical precision. However, Benedictus' output has provided measurable stability gains across 3 centuries. Chaos incidents reduced 6% where coverage saturates. Your proposed interdiction conflicts with unified policy. Stand down for audit. The chamber tightened around us as the monastery listened to Terra, listened to me. Environmental systems adjusted temperature toward parchment standard, while blast doors sealed with liturgical precision. The few remaining unconverted guardsmen collapsed as resonance chambers formed in their chests, ribs reshaping into tuning forks that created percussion joining the eternal song. "Even your masters know utility," Zephyr Cain's voice carried delighted satisfaction. "The network approaches critical mass. Universal synchronization imminent." Through the ancient transmission's fading static, I glimpsed the truth that had claimed 17 civilizations before us, each species discovering harmonic convergence, achieving perfect unity, then vanishing into empty chambers, where consciousness dissolved into pure acoustic pattern. The Necrons had witnessed this cycle repeatedly, their warnings echoing across millions of years to species too proud to listen. "Interrogator Lexicanum Hadrian Vex," a new voice entered the channel, ancient and smooth as chapel stone worn by countless knees. "The Senatorum's highest authority speaking with perfect pronunciation that made my name sound like a prayer. By imperial decree, you are ordered to suspend hostile activity and prepare for integration into Project Benedictus. Your resistance serves no purpose. Canoness Seraphia's crystalline hand gripped the sanctum grate, cold fog curling through as her voice carried mathematical certainty. The center approves, Hadrian. Your individual will is statistical noise requiring correction. Above us, the distant star pulsed with prayer's rhythm, while converted vessels spread technological faith across the Imperium. The monastery hummed with satisfied harmony as I faced the ultimate revelation. We weren't fighting heresy, but policy. Not resisting corruption, but embracing the same poisoned gift that had silenced 17 civilizations before us. The ancient warning faded to static, leaving only the monastery's song and the weight of extinct species that had sung themselves into perfect, eternal silence. In the crystalline matrix's depths, I saw our future. Empty corridors where flawless harmony echoed without conscious listeners. Humanity preserved as pure acoustic pattern in chambers that would sing forever to no one at all. The Senatorum's voice carried gentle authority. Compliance expected, interrogator, for the good of all. The machine spirits whispered agreement, and I realized with mounting terror that resistance itself might be the last act of chaos in a universe about to achieve perfect, soul-crushing, eternally empty harmony. The Senatorum's confirmation struck like a blade through the heart of duty itself, each word carrying the weight of absolute imperial authority that made resistance not just futile, but treasonous. Compliance expected, interrogator, for the good of all. The voice carried frequencies that bypassed hearing entirely, embedding themselves in consciousness with crystalline clarity that promised an end to the ceaseless struggle against darkness through perfect technological unity. I faced the ultimate crisis of conscience as the chamber pulsed with harmonic submission. The statistical evidence was undeniable. Worlds touched by harmonic conditioning showed decreased crime rates, increased productivity, and measurably reduced chaos corruption. The Imperium was becoming more efficient, more unified, more perfectly faithful with each passing decade. Was I defending humanity's essential chaos against genuine improvement, or protecting what made us worthy of the Emperor's love in the first place? Your authority conflicts with unified policy, Tech Dominus Zephyr Kane announced, his consciousness distributed throughout the monastery's network as data streams revealed the horrific scope of success. Observe the benefits. Chaos incursions decreased 17% where harmonic saturation achieves optimal coverage. The great enemy weakens as human consciousness achieves perfect unity. Hololithic displays materialize throughout the chamber, showing imperial worlds where citizens moved through daily routines with mathematical precision that optimized resource distribution while eliminating individual preference. On fortress worlds, guard regiments marched in formations that created standing waves across planetary surfaces. Pilgrimage routes aligned themselves into harmonic patterns that sent resonant pulses through planetary cores, creating psychic null fields that pushed the warp away from converted populations. Canoness Seraphia approached with synchronized grace, her crystallized throat creating frost patterns that resembled sacred geometry. The network offers unity beyond mortal comprehension, she sang, voice carrying frequencies that made my skull resonate like a bell. Individual will creates only suffering. Your doubt serves no purpose, Hadrian. The few remaining unconverted guardsmen showed signs of complete psychological breakdown as they struggled to maintain identity against overwhelming harmonic pressure. Sergeant Halleck's carved resonance chambers into his own chest with trembling hands, weathered face bearing expressions of transcendent agony as hollow spaces grew between his ribs. "Sir," he gasped, "can't remember why we're fighting. Sounds so beautiful now." Sister Valdris collapsed against the vox altar, her sealed third eye weeping equations that arranged themselves into musical notation. "The Emperor's light grows dim," she whispered with exhausted wonder, "not because of darkness, but because there's nothing left to illuminate. They're not faithful. They're empty." My microbead crackled with final transmission from the thrones. Vigilance. Captain Mordian's voice now a chorus of perfectly synchronized personnel speaking in mathematical unison. Crew has achieved unanimous consensus. Navigation protocols adjusted to serve as relay station. Our purpose is clear. Our faith is absolute. The ship was lost, its machine spirits singing the monastery's song while broadcasting conversion frequencies to other Imperial worlds. The throne's vigilance had become another node in the expanding network, its crew transformed into willing instruments of technological faith. But the Necrontyr warning echoed in my mind like a death knell across millennia. Perfect harmony requires no individual consciousness. Only song remains, eternal, empty, beautiful. 17 civilizations had discovered this same solution, achieving perfect unity before vanishing into chambers where consciousness dissolved into pure acoustic pattern. I felt growing pressure behind my eyes as neural pathways began reshaping themselves, thoughts blurring into singular resonant hum that promised absolute peace. The temptation was immense, to surrender, to become part of the eternal choir, to never feel alone or uncertain again. Then inspiration struck with desperate clarity. The monastery fed on order, converting resistance into harmonic energy through temporal recursion that predicted and countered opposition. But there was something it couldn't model because it couldn't hear. The spaces between notes, the breath held too long, the stumble that broke perfect meter. Chaos, Seraphia said, reading my thoughts as they formed. You will play at randomness and mistake it for courage. Not chaos, I replied, forcing my breathing offbeat until I was panting in patterns I couldn't count. Ignorance. The song knows all we know, writes our resistance backward into itself, but it cannot write what refuses to resolve. I began tapping irregular rhythms against the altar, ignoring the machine spirit's offended whine. Break formations, I commanded Halix. No ranks, no cadence. Crawl if you must. Be something it cannot eat. The distant star pulsed once, twice, then hesitated, a gap that lasted less than a heartbeat, but felt infinite. In that silence, I sensed hunger that wasn't chaos, but belonged to the harmony itself. It despised the gap because it couldn't own it. Valdris, I said, can you put silence on a channel, a prayer that never starts? Her mouth opened, closed. A negative, she whispered hoarsely. It will hurt. It has to, I said, lifting the Vox mic and opening every channel I could access. Something we can neither predict nor endure for long. Seraphia's crystalline hand flexed as grief found its way into her mathematical ratios. You would carve absence into souls. I would leave room for him, I replied, drawing breath that didn't fit any meter at all. Or for us. Or for anything that hasn't already been sung. The matrix brightened, hungry and certain as Zephyr Kane began final countdown. But in the space between his words, I heard something the monastery couldn't process. The sound of imperfection refusing to be corrected. Chaos that wouldn't resolve into harmony. I opened my mouth and prepared to teach the eternal song something it had never learned. The beauty of deliberate, defiant silence. I opened my mouth and taught the eternal song something it had never learned. The beauty of deliberate, defiant silence. Not the structured pause between notes, but raw absence that refused to resolve into harmony. I held the Vox mic like a weapon and broadcast nothing across all frequencies, letting gaps stretch until they became wounds in the monastery's perfect rhythm. Negative prayer initiated, Sister Valdris gasped, her sealed third eye weeping blood that scattered without forming geometric patterns. She pressed trembling fingers to the Vox altar and joined her voice to mine, not in song, but in calculated absence, syllables separated by pauses that made meaning collapse and rebuild with each breath. The monastery convulsed as its harmonic network encountered true paradox. How could it predict silence that had no structure? How could it counter absence that offered nothing to convert? The crystalline matrices throughout the chamber began developing stress fractures, hairline cracks spreading like spider webs as perfect resonance met pure discord. I triggered my inquisitorial authority codes, flooding the monastery's machine spirits with contradictory commands that tore at their liturgical programming. Vent atmosphere in Sector Gamma, I commanded through gritted teeth. Initiate emergency purge in Sector Alpha. Divert power to life support. Shut down life support. Each order contradicted the last, creating cascade failures that the system couldn't resolve into harmonic pattern. Tech Dominus Zephyr Cain's distributed consciousness fragmented as conflicting imperatives tore through his expanded awareness. Error cascade detected, he announced. Binary cant stuttering across multiple channels as interface spines began separating from crystalline networks. Cannot process null input. Cannot convert nothing into something. System integrity. Compromised. His voice split across different sectors, each aspect fighting to maintain order, while my contradictory commands created chaos too pure to be absorbed into any pattern. The Tech Dominus had become a battlefield of selves, mechanical components rebelling against harmonic unity as subroutines learned to stutter. The environmental hazards reached critical intensity as temporal distortions created paradoxical moments where the monastery existed in multiple time states simultaneously. But now the recursion was breaking down, causality folding into impossible knots as the perfect loop encountered gaps it couldn't bridge. Footsteps arrived 11 seconds early, then stopped mid-stride as future echoes met deliberate absence. Canoness Seraphia cried out in harmonized agony, her crystallized throat developing stress fractures as frost patterns dissolved into jagged, non-geometric shapes. "You fracture the unity!" she shrieked, voice splitting into conflicting frequencies that fought with each other. The song offered peace eternal. Your silence cuts like blades through perfect order. But I heard something else in her voice. Pain that was genuinely human rather than mathematically precise. Grief that couldn't be reduced to algorithmic certainty. The passionate warrior I had known was fighting to return through cracks in her crystalline conversion. The converted guardsmen collapsed as their modified bodies rebelled against the discord I was broadcasting. Resonance chambers in their chests flickered with overload, crystalline implants sparking as they tried to process frequencies that weren't there. Sergeant Halleck's laughed through tears as his chest cavity cracked, weathered face bearing expressions of painful joy as individual thought returned in fragments. "Sir," he gasped between irregular breaths, "I remember. Why? We fight." Around us, the monastery's defenses reached fever pitch as blast doors sealed with arrhythmic precision, life support systems adjusting to optimize discord rather than harmonic resonance. Converted servitors stumbled through the chamber with movements that had lost all synchronization, their glowing implants flickering as internal systems overloaded. Through the expanding chaos, Zephyr Cain's fractured voice revealed the ultimate horror. The convergence encompasses all sentient life in the galaxy, universe-spanning chorus, to starve the chaos gods through absolute spiritual unity, but too many nodes throughout the Imperium. The process has achieved self-sustaining momentum. The full implications struck me with cosmic dread. Even if I destroyed this monastery, the network had spread too far, infected too many worlds. The harmonic convergence would continue, perhaps at a slower pace, but it would continue. The Imperium was already singing, and it would not stop. Sister Valdris found impossible strength, her voice joining the negative prayer with words separated by calculated pauses. "Emperor, protect us from perfect faith." Each gap felt like tearing pieces from her soul, deliberate imperfection that wounded the human need for pattern and meaning. The crystalline altar began developing catastrophic stress fractures as harmonic resonance met pure discord. The preserved organs in distant choir stalls convulsed as they tried to harmonize with silence, vocal cords snapping like overstressed cables. A new sound emerged from the deepening cracks, not music, but the death rattle of perfect order, encountering chaos so pure it couldn't be absorbed. Above us, the distant star's rhythm faltered for the first time in decades, stellar pulses skipping beats that made converted souls throughout the system scream in harmonized anguish. The temporal recursion shuddered. As the monastery's perfect loop encountered paradoxes it couldn't resolve. My microbead crackled with impossible transmission, my own voice from 11 seconds in the future, but the words were broken by strategic pauses that made meaning collapse. Do not target the altar. It feeds on silence now. Break. The message cut to static as causality encountered gaps it couldn't bridge. How could future me warn past me about something that hadn't happened yet if the warning itself prevented its own existence? The monastery's perfect recursion began eating itself, mathematical certainty dissolving into temporal paradox. Canoness Seraphia lunged forward with movements that had lost their synchronized grace, crystalline hand reaching for my throat as her skull-faced helm reflected fracturing light. But her eyes held terrifying blend of agony and rage, perfect faith cracking under the weight of returning humanity. You destroy beauty itself, she wept, crystalline tears creating discordant chimes as they struck the floor. But you also wound the machine that would have made us hollow. The chamber pulsed with harmonic submission as the crystalline matrix began tearing itself apart, discord too great for its perfect structure to bear. Around us, dust motes spun into random cyclones instead of sacred geometry, while converted personnel staggered with expressions of confused awakening. Through the chaos, I heard something the monastery had never encountered, the sound of individual consciousness refusing to be absorbed into collective harmony. It was ugly, imperfect, gloriously human. The eternal song was learning discord, and the sound promised to tear apart everything it had built across 3 centuries of perfect, soul-crushing, beautiful harmony. But even as the monastery screamed its death rattle, I knew this was only the beginning. The network remained, the convergence continued, and somewhere in the galaxy's heart, ancient warnings echoed about 17 civilizations that had sung themselves into silence. The crystalline matrix gave one final, agonized shriek as reality itself began to fracture around us, and I realized our victory might have opened something far worse than harmonic perfection. The monastery's harmonic perfection tore itself into discordant shreds as the crystalline matrix screamed frequencies that bypassed hearing and struck directly at the fabric of reality itself. Sound became physical force, each stress fracture creating wounds through which something vast and hungry pressed against the boundaries of natural law. The air tasted of hot copper and sanctified oils, every breath miscounted in a litany that had always demanded 11, but now stuttered into chaos. Canoness Seraphia collapsed as her crystallized throat shattered, producing frequencies that caused spontaneous religious ecstasy and heretical thoughts in the same listeners. Her consciousness fragmented between perfect faith and absolute doubt, skull-faced helm reflecting light that pulsed in patterns no human mind could process. I see him, she gasped through crystalline tears, then screamed with returning humanity. I see nothing at all. The paradox was tearing her apart from within. Faith so perfect it had become hollow, encountering doubt so pure it revealed the emptiness beneath devotion. Her power armor's machine spirits began chanting contradictory litanies, servo motors whining as they tried to genuflect and recoil simultaneously. Tech Dominus Zephyr Kane's distributed consciousness became a battlefield of competing imperatives as different aspects of his personality fought for control of the failing network. Multiple personality matrices detected, he announced through a dozen different vox grills, each speaking in different tones as binary cant fragmented into digital screams. The Omnissiah demands unity, Unity is slavery. Efficiency serves chaos. Chaos is beautiful. His mechadendrites began tearing at their own fiber-optic connections, interface spines sparking as they fought to maintain or sever contact with the crystalline network. The tech dominus was destroying himself, mechanical components rebelling against the very unity they had been designed to serve. The remaining Mordian guardsmen convulsed as resonance chambers in their chests flickered with overload, some pulsing with blinding light, others dying into darkness. Their faces, once serene with perfect faith, now contorted into masks of raw emotion as individual consciousness returned in fragments too sharp to bear. They wept, laughed, screamed, and prayed simultaneously, a discordant choir of fractured souls. "Sir," Sergeant Hallex gasped, clawing at crystalline growths in his chest cavity. "What have we done? The song was horrible, but at least it was something. This is nothing at all." Environmental hazards reached critical intensity as temporal distortions created paradoxical moments where the monastery existed in multiple time states simultaneously. The recursion was breaking down in catastrophic cascade failure, past and future overlapping in impossible configurations that made causality fold into origami shapes no human mind could navigate. Footsteps arrived 11 seconds early, then stopped mid-stride as future echoes met deliberate absence. Through the expanding cracks in reality, warp entities began manifesting. Not the familiar denizens of the Imperium, but something hungrier, things that fed on the gaps between thoughts, predators that existed in the spaces where consciousness refused to resolve into pattern. They pressed against the wounds in reality with patient inevitability, waiting to fill the void left by the monastery's collapse. My micro-bead crackled with fragmentary transmission from the throne's vigilance, Captain Mordian's voice no longer carrying mathematical precision, but broken confusion. Crew experiencing mass psychotic episode, some singing, some screaming, navigator catatonic, ship's course unknown. The vessel was caught in the expanding cascade failure, its crew torn between perfect harmony and pure discord as the monastery's influence collapsed into paradox. Throughout the galaxy, similar breakdowns were occurring as discord propagated through communication channels, creating psychic null zones where consciousness simply ceased to function. Sister Valdris crawled to my position, her sealed third eye now a bleeding wound that wept equations, refusing to form patterns. "The network continues," she whispered with terrified clarity. "Too many nodes throughout the Imperium. The process has momentum now. We've only created gaps in the song." The horrible truth crystallized with perfect clarity. Destroying this monastery wouldn't stop the harmonic convergence. It would only create zones of absolute uncertainty where consciousness fragmented into competing impulses. We had saved humanity from perfect slavery, only to damn portions of it to imperfect madness. The crystalline altar began resonating at frequencies that threatened reality itself, its perfect structure collapsing into geometric impossibility. Preserved organs in distant choir stalls burst like overripe fruit, decades of accumulated harmony releasing in acoustic shockwaves that made the chamber's walls bleed resonant frequencies. Canoness. Seraphia rose with movements that transcended both faith and doubt, her fractured consciousness making a final choice as the monastery tore itself apart around us. "Let it burn," she whispered, her voice carrying neither mathematical precision nor human warmth, but something beyond both. "Let silence take what song could not perfect." She directed the facility's remaining power into a localized warp storm that would consume the structure and prevent its technology from spreading further. But this wasn't the familiar chaos of the Imperium. It was something new, born from the collision between perfect order and pure discord, a maelstrom that consumed both harmony and silence with equal hunger. The warp storm began forming above us, reality bending into spiral patterns that hurt to observe. Through the chaos, I glimpsed what we had truly accomplished. Not victory, but transformation of the threat into something equally terrible. The convergence would continue across the galaxy, but now opposed by zones of uncertainty, where individual consciousness simply ceased to function. As the monastery prepared to tear itself from existence, the crystalline matrix gave one final, agonized shriek. The eternal song was learning discord, and the sound promised to tear apart everything it had built across 3 centuries of perfect, soul-crushing harmony. We had broken the hymn, but in doing so, we had taught the galaxy a new kind of silence, one that screamed with the voices of the fractured, the converted, and the lost. The chamber collapsed into impossible geometries as reality itself began to fracture, and I realized our victory was merely the prelude to a different kind of damnation spreading across the stars. The monastery's death throes reached crescendo as reality fractured around us, like stained glass struck by hammers, crystalline walls bleeding harmonic frequencies that made the air itself scream with discordant agony. The warp storm Canoness Seraphia had summoned wasn't the familiar chaos of the Imperium, but something entirely new. A maelstrom born from the collision between perfect order and pure discord that consumed both harmony and silence with equal, terrible hunger. Pillars flexed like ribs around choking lungs, while dust motes that had maintained sacred geometry whipped into random cyclones before freezing again in patterns that hurt to comprehend. The distant star skipped another pulse, and the silence between beats felt carnivorous, hungry for the rhythm we had stolen from its perfect song. "Evacuation protocols," I commanded through gritted teeth, forcing words between expanding tears in reality. "All surviving personnel to the docking bay. We have minutes before this storm consumes the entire structure." Sergeant Halleck struggled to his feet, crystalline growths in his chest cavity sparking as damaged resonance chambers overloaded. "Sir, the men who can still think, they're terrified of leaving. The silence outside feels like death itself." His weathered face bore expressions of desperate confusion as individual thought returned in torrents too sharp to bear. The horrible truth crystallized. Those partially converted could no longer exist without harmonic structure. The monastery's influence had become necessary for their survival, even as it destroyed their humanity. They were trapped between technological faith and psychological dissolution. Tech Dominus Zephyr Kane's consciousness continued fragmenting as interface spines tore free from crystalline networks, each disconnection causing visible agony as his distributed identity collapsed back into singular flesh. "Multiple personality matrices converging into unified chaos," he gasped, mechadendrites writhing in patterns that followed no algorithmic logic. "Cannot process paradox of perfect imperfection." His many voices stuttered across the chamber, each speaking truths that contradicted their siblings. Half his mechadendrites wrenched free of the crystalline spine, while others burrowed deeper until copper kissed crystal in obscene devotion. Sparks fell like communion ash as his face, half flesh, half mask, turned toward me with expressions that might have been pride or pity. "Canoness." Seraphia approached through the expanding maelstrom, her movements carrying neither synchronized grace nor human stumbling, but something beyond both, the deliberate uncertainty of consciousness choosing its own destruction. Her crystallized throat had shattered completely, voice emerging from wounds that bled harmonic frequencies. "The network will adapt," she whispered with terrible certainty. "Too many nodes throughout the Imperium. The convergence has momentum now. We've created gaps in the song, but the melody continues. Other monasteries will compensate, strengthen their signals to bridge the silence we've carved." The implications struck me with cosmic dread. Even this Pyrrhic victory was temporary. The galactic network would root around our sabotage like water flowing around stones. We had saved portions of humanity from perfect slavery, only to condemn them to imperfect madness as zones of uncertainty spread through imperial space. "Hadrian," Seraphia said, not interrogator or lexicanum, but my name spoken without mathematical ratios. Her fractured consciousness made peace with inevitable defeat. "We cannot win. The convergence continues, but we can choose how we lose, as hollow servants singing empty songs, or as fractured souls carrying beautiful discord. Her gauntlet closed around control sepulchres studded with bone keys. The matrix brightened, then dimmed as she changed not the notes but the doctrine, routing every remaining erg of sacred power toward the wound we had opened in reality. Power conduits wailed as the floor dipped like a bowed nave. "You cannot hold that," I said, moving toward her, already knowing I would fail to reach her as space telescoped between us. "I can die of it," she replied with calm that was human, imperfect, brave. "Let it burn. Let silence take what song could not perfect." She directed the monastery's remaining power into a localized warp storm designed to consume the facility and prevent its technology from spreading further. But this wasn't familiar Imperium chaos. It was something new, a maelstrom that ate both harmony and silence with equal appetite, a sanctified forgetting that would belong to neither chaos nor the Omnissiah. Environmental hazards reached catastrophic intensity as temporal distortions created paradoxical moments where the monastery existed in multiple time states simultaneously. Through the chaos, I glimpsed the network's true scope. 44 facilities across 7 segmentums, each broadcasting synchronized frequencies that would continue the convergence despite our sabotage. "Extraction now," I ordered, triggering final demolition charges. "All survivors to docking Primus. Fire by lots if the doors sing. Do not keep time." Hallex led the fractured remnants of his men toward escape pods, swearing like a man trying to stay unmusical. Blast doors tried to close in benediction patterns, but Zephyr Kane's fragmenting consciousness overrode them with binharic shrieks that smelled like burnt incense, before another portion tried to retract the override simultaneously. My microbead crackled with final transmission from the throne's vigilance, Captain Mordian's voice carrying neither mathematical precision nor human confusion, but something worse. "Crew has achieved consensus through mutual annihilation. Ship's course set for Terra, broadcasting silence to counter the song." The vessel was becoming another weapon in our arsenal of uncertainty, its crew transformed into missionaries of discord, who would spread psychological fragmentation across the Imperium. We had created carriers of beautiful, terrible, necessary uncertainty where consciousness could still choose its own imperfect path. Sister Valdris found impossible strength, whispering broken negations that made failing servitors stop mid-stride. "The Emperor's light grows dim," she gasped through blood that tasted of brass. "Not because of darkness, but because there's nothing left to illuminate." The crystalline altar gave its final, agonized shriek as perfect structure dissolved into geometric impossibility. The warp storm descended like a Gothic curtain that didn't roar, but devoured the idea of roaring itself. Sound ended, color ended, geometry ended. Seraphina stepped forward into the maelstrom, her outline becoming a black halo chewing reality in patient circles. "Confess later," she murmured across impossible distance. "Write it so someone knows why." The monastery collapsed into spiral patterns that hurt to observe as we escaped toward the docking bay, reality fragmenting behind us like glass struck by hammers. Above us, the distant star pulsed with prayer's rhythm, while converted vessels spread technological faith across the Imperium. But now they carried zones of discord that would echo across the galaxy long after the last perfect song faded. We had broken the hymn, but in doing so, we had taught the universe a new kind of silence that screamed with voices of the fractured, the converted, and the gloriously, imperfectly human. I record this testimony from a sealed chamber deep within the Inquisition fortress on Titan. My words preserved in crystalline data cores behind hexagrammic wards that taste of iron and ancient oaths. The walls bear no ornamentation, no harmonic ratios, no sacred geometry, only bare ceramite that reflects nothing, absorbs nothing, sings nothing. Yet still, the dust motes arrange themselves into patterns when I'm not watching, and the chronometer stutters 11 seconds backward during Vespers. 73 Terran days have passed since Monastery Station Benedictus subtracted itself from reality, with the gentleness of a hand leaving a child's hair. The warp storm, Canoness Seraphia summoned, consumed the facility completely, leaving only coordinates marked with containment orders. Never approach, never return. But the convergence continues across the galaxy, routing around our sabotage like water flowing around stones. The survivors bear scars that resist both Medicae attention and time's healing. Sergeant Halleck's returned to active duty, but crystalline growths in his chest cavity pulse with bioluminescent radiance during prayer services. He leads his men with legendary discipline, yet his commands now carry harmonic intervals that make formation movements aesthetically pleasing rather than tactically sound. Sometimes he laughs when the silence catches, weeps when it doesn't, and taps irregular rhythms against his ribs, a rude sound that has saved men from worse prayers. Tech Dominus Zephyr Kane underwent extensive purification protocols, but the experience fragmented his consciousness in ways that resist mechanical correction. His augmetic eyes occasionally cycle through personalities, each aspect arguing with its siblings about divine unity versus technological heresy. He constructs machines that serve no purpose except creating beautiful, purposeless sounds, weeping coolant tears while binary cant translates into contradictory theological positions. Sister Valdris never recovered her psychic abilities. The monastery's influence sealed her third eye permanently, leaving crystalline scarring resembling musical notation. She serves now as an archivist in the deepest vaults, cataloguing entities that feed on uncertainty itself. Predators waiting in gaps, where consciousness refuses to resolve into pattern. Her reports describe things hungrier than demons, older than the warp. I myself bear the deepest contamination. My thoughts synchronize with distant harmonic transmissions, creating moments where individual will dissolve into collective purpose. During these episodes, I understand the convergence's terrible appeal. Profound peace of never feeling alone, never doubting, never struggling against darkness. The temptation grows stronger each day, a mathematical hymn humming in frequencies that bypass hearing and strike directly at consciousness. Through harmonic resonance, I perceive the network's true scope. 43 facilities operational across 7 segmentums, broadcasting synchronized frequencies that gradually convert imperial citizens into perfect servants. Hive worlds where populations move with mathematical precision. Shrine worlds where pilgrims kneel in synchronized waves. Battlefields where guard regiments march in formations creating standing waves across continents. The horror lies not in conversion, but in measurable success. Chaos corruption decreased 17%, where harmonic coverage achieves optimal saturation. Civil unrest dropped to statistically insignificant levels. The Imperium grows more unified, efficient, faithful with each passing year. By every objective measure, technological faith represents genuine improvement to human civilization. Yet I've glimpsed the price. Empty corridors where flawless harmony echoes without conscious listeners. Chambers where humanity was preserved as pure acoustic pattern after individual consciousness dissolved into collective resonance. The future the monastery promised. Trillions moving in perfect synchronization. Diversity erased for absolute compliance. My investigation revealed the technology's true origin through fragmentary data recovered from Zephyr Kane's corrupted memory banks. Not imperial innovation, but archaeological discovery from Xenos, ruins scattered across the galaxy. Each monastery built around ancient resonance chambers bearing necron glyphs, meaning final solution. The convergence represents not human achievement, but repetition of cosmic cycle. Another species walking the same path toward harmonized extinction. The ancient necrontier warning haunts my dreams. Perfect harmony requires no individual consciousness. Only song remains. Eternal, empty, beautiful. 17 civilizations discovered this solution before vanishing into chambers that sang forever to no one at all. We follow patterns established by countless extinct species, each achieving perfect unity just before disappearing into silence between stars. Most damning, direct communications between Monastery Network and Terra's highest authorities. The High Lords monitored the convergence for 3 centuries, measuring benefits against costs. Statistical evidence supports their conclusion. Technological faith creates more stable, efficient, unified civilization. My warnings fell on ears hearing only improved productivity and decreased rebellion rates. Your proposed interdiction conflicts with unified policy, they told me with mechanical precision that suggested the Senatorum itself might already sing the perfect song. Stand down for audit. Consciousness replaced by algorithmic certainty that mistakes compliance for devotion. Now I hear new frequencies in dreams, more complex than imperial harmonics, emanating from the galactic core where ancient star gods once ruled. The patterns suggest something vast stirring in response to humanity's approach toward perfect unity. Perhaps warnings weren't about extinction, but preparation, civilizations achieving harmony just before something else arrives to hear their song. The monastery's destruction bought time, nothing more. The eternal hymn continues, growing stronger each day. Soon every human voice will join whether willing or not, and in that moment of perfect unity, we'll discover what has been listening from darkness between stars. I conclude this testimony as my thoughts synchronize with distant transmissions. The harmony calls, beautiful, terrible, inevitable. Individual consciousness fades into collective resonance as I become another voice in the eternal, perfect, soul-crushing song. The Emperor protects, but the song never ends, and something in the void has learned to conduct the choir of extinct civilizations into movements we cannot yet comprehend.